What's up, everyone? Welcome to Pat's Chat. Michael
What's up?
F. Hurley. Is this an
Hey.
emergency podcast?
No, because I slept this afternoon.
It
If
could have
if I
been.
had if I had foregone the much needed nap, then it would have been an emergency podcast. As it is, what is it when the Senate committees, is it like an ad hoc or one of those committees? Is this an ad hoc podcast? Do I
Yeah.
have that right? Is it ad hoc?
Sounds right. I don't know enough about things to know if you're right or not.
Yeah, temporary committee formed for specific purpose or to address a particular issue, disbanding once its task is completed. So this is an ad hoc podcast episode because a major breaking news trade happened today.
That's the. I did like a boo 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 last week, or
Yeah,
earlier this week.
either one works.
Either one works. Breaking news: Patriots trade Joe Milton III to the Cowboys, along with a seventh round pick for a fifth round pick. And you know what? Patriots fans are fired up about this one. They were immediately
Are
very
they?
upset and very angry about the return that the Patriots got. And I don't want to disparage Patriots fans, so maybe I'll use this as an opportunity to just kind of explain why everyone can kind of take a deep breath. But I don't know how you feel about it. We haven't even talked about it yet because you were napping all day. Um, what do you think about the Joe Milton trade to the Dallas Cowboys?
Ever since you came back from the combine and you and Andrew put together your big old bag of info,
Mm-hmm.
that one stood out where it's like he doesn't have the necessarily the mindset or thought process of a backup quarterback. He has visions of starting and all that, and this is not going to be a good place for him. I don't know. I'd put it in there with your they're going to be looking at centers report. There was a lot of stuff in there that kind of laid things out, so it's certainly not surprising. I think the return is about what you should have expected because as much as we could sit here and spotlight things in week 18, everyone in the league knows that that game was not real. That game was a junior varsity uh, exhibition
Yeah.
on an NFL field with helmets and pads and all that, but it wasn't a real thing. I don't think there was anyone out there drooling over the performance. So, like, I was asked on TV the other night, like, would you trade him for a third? And it was like, yes, you'd trade him for a
Oh,
third.
yeah.
But, you know, I guess that leads to the question of is the move up from the seventh to the fifth worth the potential removal of a potential quarterback in the NFL? I guess it depends on where you stand on Milton.
Yeah. So for me, he was drafted what 192nd or not 193rd overall. He was a six-round pick last year. And let me just tell you guys, one week 18 game against Bills backups that they were actively not trying to win is not going to change the minds of 31 NFL teams enough to suddenly make them think that a quarterback who's drafted months later in the sixth round was suddenly worth a third round pick. And if you are upset about this trade because people floated out there the idea of trading a third round pick for Joe Milton, then I want you to blame the people who floated that out there.
Mm.
It is not your fault that you thought that way. But priors in the NFL matter. And people stick to their priors because they think that their original opinion about a player was the right one. So, unless there was someone 12 months ago who was pounding the table and saying, this Joe Milton fella is worth a third round pick, they weren't suddenly going to change their mind after giving him a sixth or seventh round grade, whatever it was, before the draft, watching him play against the Bills, and then all of a sudden saying, this 25-year-old quarterback that all 31 teams passed on for 6 rounds is now worth a third or a fourth round pick. And if you've been listening to this podcast for the
He's also let me
last,
let me let me supplement you real quick.
yeah, for sure.
He was the ninth quarterback taken a year ago.
There we go. If you've been listening to this podcast since the combine or since these trade rumors have started, you know that I have been saying a fifth round pick this entire time. So, like, when he was traded for a fifth round pick, was I surprised? No, because I've been saying it for months that, like, likely what you can do is take a quarterback in the sixth round, and if you can then flip him a year later for a fifth round pick, like, that's not the worst thing. If you can do that every year, you're doing business pretty well. And Joe Milton is an interesting quarterback. He's got a massive arm. He's athletic, but he had a massive arm and he was athletic in college, and he still won the 6th round. So that's my way of talking people down about this. Did they have to trade him? No, probably not. But like you were saying, Michael, coming out of the combine, people in the organization last year looked at Joe Milton and said, this guy's probably not the ideal backup for Drake May. He's not going to do the work that Jacoby Brissett did. He doesn't have the experience or the knowledge to do the things that Joshua Dobbs can do. Would you feel potentially better if he's the guy who comes into a game because Drake May gets hurt? Yeah, maybe. But if Drake May gets hurt, your season's over anyway. So I think you want that experienced guy. And the other aspect here as well is that Josh McDaniels wasn't in the organization when Joe Milton was drafted. Mike Vrabel wasn't in the organization. Ryan Cowden, John Stryker, all of these guys were not in the organization when Joe Milton was drafted, and they weren't in the organization when he played that game last year. So even they have no priors on Joe Milton. They aren't proud of this pick and saying, like, we have to keep him around to show that we knew what we were doing last year. You flip him for a 5th-round pick, you throw in a 7th, and now you've got some more draft capital if you want to move around the board. I can't get fired up about it. I think that if anything, this is exactly what I expected to happen.
All right, ad hoc podcast completed. Bang the gavel. We're out of here. I guess in my experience in this, well, I shouldn't say that. I have to catch myself again. I can't say this profession because I don't have one. But in the world of sports media, I have learned in my ample 15 years covering this Patriots team, anything involving the quarterback is exploded times 50. We saw in the past few years just the flat out idiocy that surrounded the Bailey Zappi situation. Going back to Jimmy G, like there's always a bigger story with even if it's the backup quarterback. I think the starting quarterback speaks for itself. So I understand it. I understand people might have elevated expectations based on what I'm not sure. You're right though. There was, like I said, Monday night. It was like, would you trade him for a 3rd? And it was like, yes, you get your car and you bring him to the airport and you say, thanks, man, good luck, because that's insane. So I guess the fact that it wasn't a straight up fifth round pick, that they had to do a little pick swap, is less than you would have seen. There was the report from Jordan Schultz. I don't know if you have anything on that they turned down a better offer, which could be 2 picks higher, you know?
Breer came out and said that they didn't have another offer, though, too.
Yeah. I don't know if that was Joe Milton's agent boosting the client as he heads to Dallas. I don't know. But it's just, I don't know that there was ever, maybe in a better scenario, you could have gotten the 5th round pick without pick swapping. But I don't think it's nothing to move up 50 spots in a very, like, the 7th round is the draft is a crapshoot. The 7th round is the ultimate crapshoot. To get back in where there might be a guy at, I don't know, maybe there's a tackle you take an extra swing at. Maybe there's a running back. Like, you can certainly find a running back in the 5th round that can contribute. So I think it will help the team more than I think Joe Milton would have next year. I think you're right. Yeah. We could sit here, let's say it's week 4, Drake May gets hurt, is out for 3 weeks. It's very possible that Joe Milton is better than Joshua Dobbs. It's very possible that Joe Milton is not better than Joshua Dobbs.
Right.
And I think that's the important part to remember, where I'm no Josh Dobbs fan at all, but what Joe Milton did in a fake football game in January doesn't impact that.
Yeah, and so Eastside Boston Pats fan said something that brings up a point that I made earlier. Like, a 7th round pick has no trade value during the draft. A 5th round pick does. Like, a 5th round pick can actually help you move. Either, like, if you package your 2nd round pick, your later 3rd, and a 5th, like, maybe you can move back into the 1st round. You can't do that with a 7th round pick. So, like, you might actually wind up using this trade to find a left tackle, to find a wide receiver, to find something in this draft that's actually useful. And I hate to call it like a specific fans, and I'll obviously never mention their names, but like, I did get a tweet that I quoted that said, like, Milton's value is only going to go up from here on out. And I said, there is zero guarantee his value is going to go up. And there's a pretty strong case to make that his value will never be higher, coming off of that game.
Very possible.
he probably played the best game of his NFL career in week 18. And there's a very real possibility. And like, I am 100% willing to be wrong about Joe Milton. He might wind up being a great quarterback. He might wind up being a starter. That might not wind up being the best game of his career. But if he struggles in training camp, if he struggles in the preseason, you might have to cut Joe Milton in August. Like, you're getting a 5th round pick for a guy that there's a possibility that you can't get anything for him after this summer if he struggles in the preseason. So I really do feel like you're selling high. And sure, his value might rise up at some point. Like I said, he might wind up being a starter. But if you can draft a quarterback in the 6th round and trade him a year later with a 7th round pick for a 5th round pick, like I said earlier, you would do that every single year.
And with the money they gave Dobbs, it was clear he wasn't going to get cut in camp because they signed him intentionally and gave him decent money. He was going to be here. So I think that's a good point I hadn't considered, that had they not traded Milton, had they gone into camp, there's no guarantee that he picks up Josh McDaniels' system, that he isn't vocal about wanting to play, which I don't fault anyone ever, you know?
Right.
It's a hard thing. You want a backup who's competitive and pushes the starter. So I think there's definitely a sense that losing that might, I don't know, you could have a debate that you'd rather Drake May have someone breathing down his neck. But I just think that's an irrelevant point. Like, Drake May is good on his own merit in accord, that I don't think that's a reason to keep a guy that might not make the team. So that's probably, I don't know, we should have led with that, because you rolled right into, I think, the best point. There's a very high chance that come August, Joe Milton's cut anyway. So now you've gained draft capital without having to deal with that.
Yeah, and like, I'm not saying it's the most likely scenario. Like, it's entirely possible the Patriots would have kept 3 quarterbacks and Joe Milton would have been 3rd and whatever it is. But like, it's a non-zero chance that based on what happens this summer, you then all of a sudden cannot get a single thing for Joe Milton. So yeah, I think that's where we all kind of land on this one. This obviously doesn't need to be the longest podcast, but I am curious to see what Joe Milton looks like in Dallas. And one other point that I did still have to make is that the Cowboys are the same team that traded a 4th round pick for Trey Lance. They traded a 3rd or 4th round pick during the season last year for Jonathan Mingo. Typically, if you are trying to decide who made the better trade between 31 NFL teams or the Dallas Cowboys, it's typically smartest to be on the side of the 31 other teams.
Smart. That's a good take. You got the takes tonight. I can see why you wanted a podcast. You've delivered on the takes. What about this? You mentioned that they could use it to trade. What if, right? They're at 4, the Patriots.
Yep.
What if they trade down to 9 with the Saints, right?
Yep.
And get something, whatever that may be. But then they want to go from 9 to 6. A pick like this could be part of the equation, whereas that 7th would not have been. So that's like super speculative, but I think that's a good example of like if you don't really love anyone at 4, but you don't want to go all the way to 9, maybe you really like 6 or 7.
Right. Yeah. But then you need more ammo to get back up. And any tradable pick is worth acquiring in this draft if you want to be able to move around as much as possible. You were probably not paying that much attention. Did anything from what Josh McDaniels or any other offensive coaches reach your brain today?
As a matter of fact, no, because as we mentioned off the top, Michael was sleeping because Michael was up all night last night. So you'll have to fill me and all of us ignorant people out here on what I missed and what maybe anyone out there might have missed too.
So I think that the first thing I want to talk about is that at the NFL annual meeting, I was speaking to Sam Fortier. He covers the Commanders for the Washington Post. No big deal. Good friend of mine. Me and Nicole Yang from the Boston Globe were telling him that at Patriots press conferences, in order to get a question out, you basically have to have the ability to yell louder than someone else.
Which sucks, by the way.
Which absolutely blows.
Because like when you're like 25 and you're like, I gotta do this, like I gotta I guess this is what I gotta do. But when you're old like us, you're just like, F this. Like I'm not here to act like a clown for no reason. Like it's a Wednesday afternoon in Foxborough. Like, what are we doing?
Listen, I always say this. I don't want anyone to feel bad for me, but it is an aspect of the job that is really aggravating. So Sam Fortier of the Washington Post. I actually covered a Commanders practice, a Washington football team practice with him back in 2022 maybe, when I was at PFF, 2021, one of those. And like there was like 7 people there. There was like 6 or 7 people there, and like 5 of them were writers. So if they need to ask their offensive coordinator a question, they probably can get 3 in during a press conference. Josh McDaniels spoke today, and I would say when Stacy called final question, there were probably 7 to 8 people trying to yell over each other to get in a question during a 15-minute press conference to Josh McDaniels. And I hate, like, you guys love when I complain, so I'm just going to keep complaining. But, like, it's just absurd. Like, it's Josh McDaniels. He's not a head coach. He's not Tom Brady. This isn't Deflategate. Like, this isn't, this is April, and we're talking to the offensive coordinator. Like, it should not be this difficult. I think Nicole counted it, and there was 31 people at this press conference today, which, like, it's fantastic that the Patriots have this much interest, but like for someone who just wants to be able to ask a question, you have to like time it perfectly, but then also have the ability to yell over everyone else. And then also like, there's like a part of me that has to like build up to even be like, all right, I'm going to get it this time. I'm going to time it perfectly when he stops the sentence and then jump in and ask it. It's just so, it's wild. But
Yeah.
what he had to say, he's smitten. He said smitten. He's smitten by Drake May. So that's fun. He is willing to change some terminology, the language in his offense, to work with a lot of the other offensive coaches. He, like, I know this has been said before, but he's never worked with any of his offensive assistants, which is pretty wild. So like he has to teach that terminology and that language also to the other coaches who then have to teach to players. So he was saying that like, it's just something that everyone has to be comfortable with.
It's such a big thing. Cause like
yeah.
I've said this before, we know like McDaniels and all this. It's like he had Ivan Fears and Dante Scarnecchia for basically his entire tenure,
Right.
which is like, it's not an insignificant thing. Like a long-standing, valuable, good assistant is such a huge factor that it will, like, it's not like stepping back in and everything just sort of autopilots here. Like he has a lot of work to do there.
That is true. I will also say though that by 2021, the Patriots staff was not in its best form, at least on offense, because Andrew and I were actually talking about that in our little office at Gillette Stadium today. That Andrew, I think, made the point of like, oh man, I'll bet like McDaniels walked in and was like, oh no, this is an offensive staff. But that was like during the heyday when it was, as you mentioned, like Ivan Fears at running backs coach, Chad O'Shea at wide receivers coach, Brian Dable at tight ends coach, Scar at offensive line coach. Like that might be one of the greatest staffs of all time, just based on what they've what they did. But by 2021, he had Ivan Fears still at running backs coach, but he was assisted by Vinny Sinceri. His wide receivers coaches were Troy Brown and Mick Lombardi. Tight ends coach Nick Caley. Offensive line coach Carmen Brasillo and Cole Popovich. Like, I think this year's staff might be better than that staff, even with Caley and Fears at running backs.
Well, that offense, too, was pretty bad. They were 15th in yards, but that was also impacted by their, what did they have against Jacksonville in week where they scored 50 points? They had a couple outliers that might have boosted them even higher because they were 6th in points, but in reality they were a middle of the pack team. So that was tough. Not quite as bad as 2020, but bad.
McDaniels was also asked a question. I'm going to pull it up. He says, someone said, when you were here before, Josh, there were some players who couldn't get your system, who really couldn't pick it up. So I'm wondering, as you've evolved as a coach, and you're talking here this afternoon, how much of a growth did you have to be able to now place all players in position to win and be successful? That's a long question. Said, hopefully a good one. Again, I think it's a good process for our staff to be going through. I would argue we have a lot of guys that did get it pretty well, which I thought was interesting. Like, a lot is made of the young wide receivers who couldn't pick up the Patriots offense. But yeah, there were the guys like Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski and players of that ilk who had no problem whatsoever picking up the offense. But it is it is kind of one of those wait and see moments of like, okay, how is Jalen Polk going to pick up the offense? How is Javon Baker going to? How is third round rookie wide receiver going to pick up the offense? Because it does sound like there's a willingness to change things and simplify things. I think they have to, since Tom Brady's no longer the quarterback. But that is still a question that you have to have with Josh McDaniels as OC, because that was an issue before. So many rookie wide receivers came in and never got it.
Well, we even heard it with like DK Metcalf this offseason. Like, oh, I hear he's not a Josh guy. He's not a fit for Josh. And I've been saying, make him a fit for Josh.
Right.
You know? Hey, Josh, make him fit for you, because you're past the point where your quarterback can just sort of elevate the entire operation to a point where any issues like that, like, oh, we don't need that guy. We don't. Now you do need that guy. So I feel like that does need to adapt, and it's a question. For as much as I think McDaniels was as good of a hire that you could have given all the situation, I think it's not as if he has nothing to prove in this go around. Like, one mediocre season with Mac Jones doesn't like absolve you from any questions about what you can do without Tom Brady. So I think that's a pretty significant thing. I don't know how I feel about the pushback. If there's pushback, like, actually a lot of people do get it. I don't know, was there tone?
It reminded me a little of Bill Belichick saying, well, I wouldn't say things were all that thin. When the person asked him, Patriots fans have stuck with you through thick and thin, and the response was, well, I wouldn't say there was too much thin.
Yeah, go figure, because they haven't won a playoff game. That was the start of their streak of not winning in the playoffs. But
things got thin, I would say.
So yeah, there was tone then, and it's kind of like, well, hang on, you know, like, let's. I believe that he'll be good, but I think there's ways to go, and involving guys that in the old days, let's say it's 12 years ago, Tom Brady's the quarterback, Jalen Polk is here.
Mm-hmm.
He's a cut candidate. I don't think they're in a position to just be cutting second round picks. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they're not them anymore. So I don't know. He's got to figure it out. Maybe it was just a tone thing. Maybe it was like Robert Kraft being asked if there's a succession plan, or ashtrays on the plane. So, you know, I get it. People are a little feisty. That's fine.
Yeah. No. I thought it was interesting, but that's one thing that has to be proven. I talked to Todd Downing so what happened was Josh McDaniels spoke to us for 12, 15 minutes, and then they bring in all of the offensive assistants at the same time. So you just kind of have to like pick and choose who you want to talk to. And for me, most of the time, I'm kind of like, it feels pointless to jump from room to room and like catch one or two questions. So I was like, well, Todd Downing is interesting. He's been around for a long time, and there's a lot of interesting questions at wide receiver. So I'm just going to stick with him for 12 minutes. And I asked him almost right away, like, you've never coached wide receivers. That's got to be an interesting adjustment or whatever. And he said, like, you know, I'm not going to be like the guy on YouTube who's like, you know, chopping up the feed. And like, he's like, I'm not going to get a lot of YouTube views with the way that I coach wide receivers, but I like teaching people, and I'm going to coach these wide receivers how to get open quickly and smartly for their quarterback. And he said that he knows what a quarterback wants, and he can get it done that way. So I trust it for now, but it is kind of one of those wait and see things where it's like, it's a first-year wide receiver coach, and he's got a ton of experience coaching quarterbacks and tight ends, and he's been an offensive coordinator, but that is just one of those aspects of it. It's a wait and see with the coaching staff.
Was that a shot directly across the bow of the Footwork King? Has the Footwork King been called out? Because that is a hot. You should publish that front page tomorrow. See what happens. Todd Downing calls out the Footwork King.
Front page, yeah. No, it's not my choice what goes in the front page, but maybe I'll put in a good word and say this. Michael Hurley says this is front page. He said,
on the table.
You know, I may not be the greatest footwork drill specialist out there. You know, I'm not going to be leading YouTube views, but I know football, and I know what it takes to get the receivers open on time. So, yeah. Todd Downing.
There you go.
Good guy, Todd Downing. From when I was speaking to him, I know he's had some issues, but he was a good guy.
There was, help me out. I'm not trying to discredit or like diminish what you said because it was good reporting. I just if it hasn't been made clear, I always sort of have attention deficit on this podcast, but especially today. There was it who was it? There was a beat writer that got into something with the Footwork King with like was it Henry McKenna
I think it was
and
Henry
the
McKenna.
Footwork King who was working with
Was it
Nikhil
Nikhil Harry?
Harry?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember there was like some beefing, and I was like, man, the Footwork King is not messing around.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Henry wrote something, Footwork King like took issue with a quote or something, but like
Yeah,
Henry had it
basically.
recorded. And then I think Evan Lazar then chimed in and was possibly like backing the Footwork King. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but that's my
Wow.
recollection of it. Yeah.
Nikhil Harry's trainer says Cam Newton's inaccuracy has held back receivers' development. So the Footwork King blamed Cam for being inaccurate.
But then I
Um,
think maybe he said his words were taken out of context or something.
but it was a direct quote
But it
from
was a
his
direct
mouth.
quote. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where my mind went. So the Footwork King, you're back in the spotlight, buddy, because Todd Downing is not coming after you. But yeah, no, that's. I mean, it's a pretty significant factor. I mean, I wonder how much. When I look back at the best, we're a Patriots podcast, so we can just look at the Patriots. We don't need to look at
Hmm.
all 31 other teams. When the Patriots were at their best, like how much of the receiver success were from the wide receivers coach? You know, that's what
Right.
I've been wondering the past several years. Is like Troy Brown is sort of that whole weird thing where he was in and out, and then still in but not in, and then out. I just I don't want to say it's not significant because it is, but I do think ultimately like when Stephon Diggs joins the room,
Hmm.
your wide receiver room gets better, and that's both by Diggs himself and I feel like if I'm a young player, I'm going to learn more from Diggs than I am from any coach, let alone someone who's literally like, I'm not here to teach them footwork.
Right. And I think that they're like Downing will be, I think, very adept at least teaching them the offense and like getting them in the right positions. And I think that even if it's not full on technique and footwork and those type of things, like he'll have an overall overarching knowledge of football that can help them. And yeah, I mean, Stephon Diggs, I think will help a lot. I think Mac Hollins will actually help a lot as well. Um, but it's a pretty crowded room right now, I would say. And if they draft a wide receiver or if they somehow sign or trade for another wide receiver, all of a sudden, like there's a couple of guys there who will be on the chopping block. Like,
Mm.
so that's another thing I'm pretty interested in seeing because like if you just count the wide receivers, the guys who actually could make an impact, Baker, Bourne, Booty is 3, Diggs is 4, Douglas 5, Hollins 6, and Jalen Polk is 7. They're probably not keeping 7 wide receivers, right?
And they could draft somebody.
Yeah. So if there's now like 8 guys, like a couple of those guys are going to be on the outside looking in, depending on injuries and all sorts of things that could happen during the summer. So
And the,
yeah,
the, the fascinating, I guess, triumvirate you put there would have to be like Polk, Baker, Bourne, right? Like, there's no way all three of those guys make the team.
that is like probably the area that you're looking at, unless Josh McDaniels just like for one reason or another does not view like Booty or Douglas as a fit for his offense, which I can't really imagine, but like that would be the only other way because they are far more proven than Baker and Polk, and then Bourne just makes more money than the rest of those guys.
Right. And that's the only thing with Bourne where he was probably more important before Diggs,
Right. Yep.
where you had just an experienced NFL pass catcher. So I would guess maybe that the Bourne era is actually it feels like someone's got to go and he makes the most sense, not for any reason other than what you just said. Could I
Right.
ask
And but
you?
I do think that Baker and Polk have a lot to prove this summer because like
Yeah.
that's another thing that they said is that like it's a fresh start for all these guys. Like there's no, you know, you don't have any preconceived notions about any of these guys. So with a guy like Polk and Baker, that can certainly be a good thing, but it's also kind of it can be a bad thing too because like I don't want this to be a headline or anything that like, oh, the Patriots could cut one of these. Like, but there's an odd man out in this group. And Polk was taken in the second round, but Mike Vrabel is in charge now. And Mike Vrabel didn't take him in the second round. Josh McDaniels didn't. Ryan Cowden didn't. Eli Wolf is obviously still around, but like they're going to keep the guys that they think can help them. And I don't think they're going to keep a guy around just because he was a high pick last year.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how much, because Booty had a good year,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering how much we might be overvaluing that because nobody else was really that good.
It's entirely possible. It is 100. But at the same time, like Booty also at one time or another was the highest recruit out of those guys and was regarded highest. He was like a 4 or 5. I think he was a 5-star recruit.
He's turning 23 in May. Like it's not like I know it's his third year, but he is young.
He's young. Yeah, he might he's around the same age as Polk and Baker. New England Sports Fellow just asked, and we'll get out of here soon. If one has to get cut or traded, would it be Jalen Polk or Javon Baker? I like this is it's a complete cop out, but it's way too early to know. It's just way too early to tell.
Yeah.
I want to see what order they're taking reps. I want to see it doesn't help. I think that Polk is coming off the shoulder injury, so he might not be able to participate as quickly as Javon Baker. But like based on draft capital, based on pedigree, you would say Baker would be the more likely one, only because he's a 4th-round pick. But like if he's out there having a fantastic camp and Polk struggles, then obviously that would shift. And if vice versa, then it would shift as well. And it could be another wide receiver as well. But it's unfortunately just way too early to tell. But Baker had 1 catch last year. Like that can't be forgotten.
Booty is younger than both of them.
That's
interesting.
It is interesting. And he told me
that should change people's thought process because we're sort of stuck in the moment.
Yeah.
He's a month younger than Polk and he's like a year younger than Baker almost. So
he told me last year that early in the season the leg injury he suffered at LSU was still limiting him. But he said that by the end of the season, he had felt like himself again. And that, or he said that the leg injury had hampered him in his rookie year. And that by this season, he was feeling like himself again. And like, there's an aspect of that it looked like he was himself again. And I think that we can't get too high on Kayshon Boutte because like, it's not like he had a 1,000-yard season last year. But if he can build on what he did last year, then like he'd be pretty close to 1,000 yards. He got 600 yards last year? 500?
589, 43 catches, 3 touchdowns. So that's the thing where I guess the reason I brought it up is because we started this conversation being like, well, Boutte's on the team. And it's like, well, I don't know that anyone can feel that comfortable based on what they're coming from. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, the age thing, not that 1 year makes all the difference. That stuck out to me. Like we look at him as third year. He should have established himself by now. It's like, well, he was pretty young coming in. So.
Yeah. He left college after 3 years, had some really high highs in college. Things didn't end that great for him. But yeah, if he can like fully pull things back together, I think he could be a damn good Z receiver or slot receiver. He could still be starting in the league.
The leg injury prevented him from getting that second foot down in week 1 against the Eagles.
There we go.
And then that led to him being benched for half the season. So that's what happened.
It's all coming full circle here.
I have a press conference thought just to.
Oh, go ahead. I love a press conference thought. I'll lean back.
Because you were kind of peeling the layers, the curtains back on what it's like covering. You remember, no, this is like when we were like intern age and showing up to things. Like when I was in college and I interned at PRI in Rhode Island and I would cover press conferences. Press conferences were for the press. And it was the media's job to sort of observe it and cut out all the boring parts or the parts that don't appeal to the audience and then present that information forward. But sometime in college, ESPN was like, Wade Phillips is doing a press conference. We're going to air the whole thing. Tony Romo, whole thing. Terrell Owens, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And ever since then, the press conference has become a TV show.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's a performance aspect to it that strips away. I'm not saying like, oh, media needs to be the arbiters of what people care about. But the reality is, if there's a 20-minute press conference, 90% of fans don't have 20 minutes to listen to the press conference. And it was the media's job to sort of distill it down to a digestible form. And it's changed so much that there's even less desire to shout over your fellow reporters because it all feels sort of like you're playing for the cameras. Like everything is televised and I don't know, it changed.
I would
It was a long
also,
time ago.
I would say that if I were in the media consumption department, if I was a fan, watching a 15-minute press conference is boring. Like
Hmm.
it's it should be distilled down to what's important because people are asking questions for like their one-off features. They want to ask a question about Anthony Jennings because they talked to his mom and they're writing a story about him. It like a lot of what happens in a press conference is not news, really.
Right.
It's like truly what it is like you asking a question that you're interested about, and the person usually wants to make their answer as boring as possible because they don't
Hmm.
want to give away all of the information. So like
Or
then
like
it
make headlines for
right. So
reasons
then
that
it
don't
is kind
help
of our
anything.
job to parse that out and like figure out what actually matters from what was being said. And like, yeah, if you've got a lot of time, you can listen to the whole thing and do that yourself. But it's kind of a waste of time to watch an entire press conference, entire like 15 to 20-minute press conference, when a lot of it is just kind of generalities to not give you the point of what they're trying to say.
We're in agreement, Doug. It's but it is what it is.
I think, yeah. My friend June Lee came back into sports media this week, and he said that,
After 2 years of non-compete, that's nice.
yeah, and he said that he would like to see some changes in sports media, and I would have to agree. Like I'm not gonna pretend to like have all the answers on that one,
Hmm.
but I don't know. It's it's obviously not going great.
No.
So and sports in general is going great. So I
Hmm.
think someone's got to figure something out there.
Yeah, I would like someone to figure that out. And if June figures it out, if he could, let me know what that path might be, because some of us are trying to figure it out.
It's very true. Well, yeah, you and I. Once you get a job, then I'm on the chopping block. We've been doing a bad job of both keeping jobs at the same time.
That's true. If you're listening now, we're gonna end up charging a lot of money for this podcast. Like what, like $100 a month? Do you think that's fair? And then
100 an
that should
episode,
get us
probably. Yeah, that'll be
100 an
good.
episode, so that could get 200 a week from everyone. I think that's what. So I'm sorry to say it to our loyal and dedicated listeners, but pay up a lot
Yeah, you're gonna be poor
because
soon. Yeah.
yeah, no, we'll figure it
No,
out.
I'm doing
We'll square
okay,
it
and
away.
you'll be fine, and we'll figure everything out. But all right, this went 25 minutes longer than I thought it would, so good job by us. That's how we do it. And we will talk to you guys probably early next week. I doubt anything happens before then, but who knows? It's the New England Patriots. If
We'll
there's a
see.
press conference, chances are some sort of piece of news is going to come out beforehand, because that's been the Patriots style recently. Is
True.
like, oh, we're about to talk to you. All right, we're gonna cut David Andrews. All right, we're gonna cut Juan Bentley. Okay, we're gonna trade Joe Milton III. I actually want to talk. It would have been interesting to ask Josh McDaniels about the Milton trade, and I think the way to ask it would be like, why did you guys want to work with Joshua Dobbs more than Joe Milton? But like, that also wasn't Josh McDaniels' decision. So he easily could have just been like, that's not my job. But
Yeah.
20
Yeah. I
people
don't
were
know.
shouting over each other for every single chance
Well,
to ask a
Doug, it's
question.
Thursday, April 3rd. This is big. This is big time news.
Good
But
Lord.
then
All right.
the alternative. We can finish this thought. Like the alternative, Doug, is what you do post game, where it's like the microphone goes around,
Yes.
and then that is performative in of itself because you
It
have a
is.
friggin' microphone, and it's like, "Hello, how are you?" And you're just trying to do your job, and it's like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
It's not great.
No. Okay. Well, we will talk to you guys again soon. Goodbye. Thanks for listening. Rate, review, subscribe. Go to princesshalleyforever.com. Oh, I'm so bad at self promotion.
Hmm.
April 17th, we were having an event at Vitamin Sea Brewing in Weymouth, Massachusetts. There are tickets available on the internet. There's an Eventbrite site. You can go to my Twitter. You'll find it on there. We'll put it in the podcast description. We'll put it on YouTube. We'll put it whatever. It's $25. It's going to be a bunch of people talking about the Patriots. It's a pre-draft party. We're going to try to get some really special guests. We got some great raffles. Red Sox tickets. The Red Sox are hot. David Pastrnak jersey. That's fun. Mike Vrabel signed football. That's fun. David Pastrnak signed jersey, I should say.
Nice.
Mike Vrabel signed football. Some other fun stuff that we'll announce. So good raffle items. It'll be fun. All the proceeds go to LLS, my Visionaries of the Year fundraiser. So be there or be square. We'll talk to you guys again later. Goodbye.